Our American Graduate Series is about kids dropping out of high school, but what happens when parents drop out and become disengaged with their kids' education? Over the past 3 years or so, Albuquerque Public Schools and a group of families and community members forged a family and community engagement policy. It's a significant achievement, and we asked a group of them what it will take to put that policy into practice. Here's NMAF producer Matt Grubbs.
Thanks to you all for coming in. We're going to take half an hour here to try to summarize something that's been years in the making. So we have quite a road ahead of us. Marco, I want to start with you. If I'm a parent of a middle schooler and I walk into your school, Wilson, and I want to get involved, am I going to know how?
Usually what we start with is, what are your students' needs, right? And from there, we try to articulate the resources in which we have at our fingertips, whether it's the curriculum that we're dealing with on day-to-day, adjusting to Common Core, or if it's potential resources that you may need as a family. A number of our families are homeless or have a status of homelessness. So we try to connect those resources, our family resources through our Family Resource Center with different families. We have a school-based health center on site which can provide medical and or dental supports. We do have a family engagement piece which provides opportunities for families to come in and be specific to whether they're calling other parents for our big events that we have on a monthly or quarterly basis. They'll know what their programming of their child is, from their core classes to electives potentially. So I think our parents have a pretty good idea where we're moving on a day-to-day basis.
The challenge, I'm sure, as a district, and Annalee, maybe we can go to you, is to try to figure out how to reproduce that experience successfully in every one of the district schools. And it's a big district, which makes the challenge even more compounded, I think.
One of the primary things is to reach out into the community. We've had a series of community forums, but more importantly, I think it's been the ground, from the ground up that Families United, really led the cause in terms of working together with communities, going into the communities and having those community conversations in homes, in community centers, and really talking about how do we get our parents engaged and what are some of the barriers that we see in our schools and how can we improve the engagement of our parents. And I think it was really an eye-opener for me because parents really let their hearts out. They spoke about their day-to-day experiences and what would help to improve that. And I think that was the really strong basis for the parent involvement policy that came together, because they took all of those pieces and they defined what it means to be engaged. The other piece to that is leadership is everything. You have to have good leadership in the schools, and you have to have that willingness of that leadership to learn how to do that. We're not all experts at everything, and we all have to learn, and we have to learn from the people that we want to impact. And so I think it's important that we look at that as we look at this parent engagement policy. And I see this as a framework. I think that the real telling of how this is really going to be rolled out is the procedural directives and each of the schools, because each of the schools is unique. And each of the populations that we serve throughout the city are very different.
Sure, and those two words, procedural directives, they tend to strike, I think, a lot of people who aren't familiar with education as, oh boy, here we go again, kind of a thing. What's this going to look like? But really, Robbie, it sounds like it's part of a framework. It's saying that, okay, APS now has a family and community engagement policy, and there are 4 pillars, but those pillars need to define sort of the steps that you take to go forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, precisely. I think one of the most potentially effective components of the policy might be that APS is now on record saying that they're going to strive to utilize the histories and cultures of our families. They're going to do that to create educational programs and curricula. I think in the context of the American Graduate Initiative, I think that's going to be a critical component and allow communities to come together and define these curricula and really engage students in meaningful study. Much like the La Raza program that went on in Tucson, they completely inverted the achievement gap there and had kids engaged who were otherwise at-risk populations.
So there's really sort of different levels to engagement. Obviously, you want to engage the students, and that's something that we hear continuously throughout the American Graduate Stories that we've done. But reaching out into the community to engage parents, I know for a lot of people, and Delma, maybe this is something that you can speak to. They drop their kids off at school or drop their kids off at the bus stop, and that may be the extent of their interaction with school for, could be weeks at a time, could be months at a time.
Right.
How do you at Rio Grande deal with that?
Communication's a big one. When I first came to Rio Grande, that was what I kept hearing from some of the parents. Communication, not just in English, but in Spanish. I mean, just basic items like that make such a difference in feeling like you are part of the school, even though you may not be at the school, like you said, for three weeks at a time. But if you feel like you've received a postcard, you've received a newsletter, something like that, at least you feel like you're a little bit informed, because high schoolers are not going to tell you what's going on at school. I mean, that starts in middle school. They are not going to let you know what's going on. And then also then taking that piece too of understanding maybe some of the expectations at high school. One of the things that we did do at Rio Grande was to put together a parent handbook that had understanding how to read transcripts, what are the graduation requirements, all those things that tie into how to get your kid through navigating high school. I have 5 kids that I got through high school, and I'm always telling parents, this is the handbook I wanted to have when my kids were going through high school, because you don't participate in school, you know, a lot at the high school level.
That handbook, English and Spanish?
Yes, English and Spanish.
A lot of this seems to have to do with language, and this is something certainly not unique to Albuquerque. School districts across the country are trying to figure out, okay, so how do we best engage the parents in the community with respect to not just our particular district, but each individual school, as we've heard. And
for me, you know, my experience has been that parents have always wanted some very basic things. They want to be heard, they want to be respected, they want to be treated like they know something about their own children. And the systems, not just the educational systems, but other governmental systems, have historically not done that. They pretty much try to do things to families, to parents, to citizens, instead of engaging them. This policy was crafted by families. They did the research. They came up with the ideas. It wasn't the educators doing that for them or to them. It was them coming forward and saying, this is what we think we need. And it took a while for that to be heard, huh? For the school district to say, yeah, not everybody. There were many people that were very supportive of it, but it took a while for the system to finally say, yes, families, we believe that you are accurate in what you're trying to tell us, and we're going to use that information in a more effective way. And I think that's where we are now. If we can really use that information more effectively, which is, you know, still to be seen, because schools are different, and there are many issues that we're all struggling with that I think will impact whether this is implemented or not. You know, there is still in the belief of many of us adults that not everybody is as equal. So when Principal A looks at a parent, they might see an engaged, excited person. Principal B might look at the same person and see a troublemaker.
Yes.
And it really has to do with our experiences as we grew up or as we've done things. And all of us carry those things way down in our psyches. It's part of this history you have as a country of racism and the things that have gone on that are still deep in us, and they're hard to talk about. You know, the fact that we don't utilize history and culture to teach our kids their own history and culture is really because people don't believe it's important. Well, you know that I sat in this place here 45 years ago when I was at UNM, and we talked about the idea of using history and culture and language to help our young people back then. And here we are, it's taken 40-some years for there to be a policy that even mentions that. So the district is moving, I think, in a very positive way, but it's yet to be seen how it's going to be implemented. And implementation is always, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So I think we're all sitting back hopeful, but not ready to say, take it on yourselves. We want to still be at the table. The parents still want to be there doing that.
Sure. And Annalee?
We are going to use the history, the culture, and the language, and you cannot take language out of that culture. They are inseparable. And so I think our commitment in this policy is to do just that, is to use that as a foundation. so that, you know, that students have a meaning and can reflect on how important education is, because we're valuing where they're coming from, what their culture is, and what their language is. And by us sharing the, you know, the dual language for students, with their
Sure.
parents, with students, then we're reinforcing that.
Lorenzo, when you look at implementation of this, and we've sort of been talking about two of these pillars right now, you know, expanding the communication between the families, community partners, and schools, as well as strengthening relationships among all the different stakeholders in education. To briefly summarize that, as you look at it from a district level, and you move into this next phase of implementation, what strikes you as most important?
Well, there are many things that are important. I think, if I remember correctly, there were over 400 meetings that people had, sometimes in kitchens, and often the tenor or the tone of that set of meetings was not necessarily positive or constructive. It was similar to what I describe as a process that occurred in South Africa, where there was this process of reconciliation, and people needed to speak a lot of bitterness. They needed to talk straightforwardly about what their experiences really were like. It's difficult because as a board and as a district, in terms of leadership, we weren't always ready to hear that. We weren't always interested in wanting to find out how it is that we were not meeting the mark. And so I think that the devil, of course, is always in the details. You know, one of the things that fundamentally we haven't recognized as a society is that parenting is work. And so that when parents look like they don't have the slack, often it's because they're overwhelmed in a society that fundamentally doesn't respect them for the job that they do. We pay lip service to parents whose children do well, but when parents are coming to us saying, my child is struggling, I don't know what to do and I need help, those resources, that infrastructure is really gotten very tattered. And so we're having to move forward and rethink how we do this thing called public education. All the while we're being attacked and targeted, and there's a lot of ideological warfare that goes on that really is upping the ante in terms of tension.
It's a really difficult process. Jose, what are you picking up on?
When I look at implementation, it's almost continuous improvement that you were speaking of earlier, that I would be mindful of as we begin to roll this out in our community, that it is flexible enough, not prescriptive, but flexible enough where communities can adapt, maybe giving schools another framework or vehicle to use to actually go out and engage community. Because I look at that, when I think of engagement, I think of the process when I got married. You know, I actually went out there and courted my wife, much like we're asking our schools to go out and court their parents and say, hey, it's okay. It's all right to come walk in. You are invited. You are invited into eventually to us making decisions together, and not just making decisions together, but now even you talk about marriage and true engagement, we're integrating our resources together for our own children.
Is this something like the parent university that APS is rolling out to give, as we sort of try to drill down here, to give parents those tools that they know how to approach administration at their school?
Well, the problem with that, I think, is that kind of, again, is this, I think Annalee mentioned, it's more of a kind of, they're approaching it from a top down again. Mm-hmm. That there are these experts that are going to come and bestow wisdom upon the community in a structured and, again, top down way. And I think that one thing, and I think Diego expressed it, is that this family engagement is truly grassroots, it's bottom up. And we want to make sure that the procedural directives that help implement the policy maintain that same kind of bottom up.
So what does that look like? Give me an example of
There's a what's the Buena Fe thing, where you have teachers undertaking trainings with parents. So the teachers are being trained, and in particular continuing education criteria, but also parents are there as well, and then they share a meal. So these are real innovative ideas, and these are a lot of things that we came across when we were interviewing people and developing the policy. that are real success stories, and they're transformative. They transform the relationship. They create that kind of buy-in that we've been talking about, because you're transforming that relationship between the parents and the teachers. Right now, in my experience, it's a very kind of stilted relationship at the parent-teacher conference, where I get the feeling that the teachers are kind of in defensive mode. And I understand why. I think they've probably sat through a few unpleasant parent-teacher conferences where the parents were concerned, and that was their time to kind of vet that you've never created this more dynamic and a diversity of interactions.
And if I could give another example of how family engagement could work, WNUF is a wonderful example of how when you have school leaders and school staff that are open and just provide the space for parents to convene and to take ownership of their child's education, you see amazing things. We see this happening even starting from early childhood, where we're engaging parents as their children's first teachers at the Even Start level. And they're facilitating classes about early childhood development and brain development at the school level. And then they're going on and going further and learning about the Common Core standards and what those changes mean, and facilitating discussions with other parents about how to support their children's learning as they see these Common Core standards that will be implemented here soon statewide. And so we believe that when you give parents the space, the flexibility, when you give families the opportunity, that they will take ownership of their child's education, because we all have that interest to see our children succeed.
I just want to piggyback off of that. At Wilson, we, and I know many of our other schools, provide ESL classes for parents in the evening or in the afternoons. And I had one student that approached me just about 3 weeks ago who had said how excited she was that her mom had an opportunity to participate in these particular classes, because now not only can she help her with her homework every once in a while, I mean, I can barely help my child with her homework every once in a while, but that she can go to a store now. And when she felt somebody was sort of blowing smoke in the wrong way, she could call him on it in English and say, hey, that's not right, that doesn't feel right, what's going on?
Delma, you must run into this a lot.
So there's some of those things that we just take for granted, like knowing how to email. I had one mom who was just like, that you could tell she was just so intense, figuring out how to get this email and how to make it work. And afterwards she came up and she's like, and right away, I got it, she tell me in Spanish that now she has an email that she can give to the volleyball coach. So now she can be included as a parent on that list. She was like so happy, and and that was what she was there for.
One piece that definitely can't be left out either is student engagement. We talk about the family, but we don't often talk about the student. A lot of the times the student plays a critical role in being the link between the schools and their parents. I remember when I was in high school, my father had a hard time even writing a letter to my teacher to excuse me for an absence. I'd have to write the letter for him, and then he'd sign it. And so a lot of the times we skip over that piece where we talk about the young people and how are the schools working to engage the young people to also engage their families. And so I think that's one thing that I would like to hopefully see in the procedural directives that gets put in there, is how are we working to engage young people also.
Part of what we haven't done is we haven't really done a good assessment. You'll have parents who, well-meaning, are engaged and involved, but they're not necessarily there as leaders. And I think fundamentally we have to turn the tables on what we're doing and have them be there and engage with us as equals, as partners. It's simple and it's complex at the same time. The complexity includes, what do we do with the front office staff that aren't capable of communicating with parents from their schools when they walk in and they don't speak Spanish, or they don't speak Vietnamese, or they don't remember that it's okay to stop what they're doing and listen for a few minutes and then direct someone to a place where they can get some assistance. Often the pressures that schools are under, it's like a huge pressure cooker, and they're just trying to get through the day with 20 things that they know they're never going to get to. We want to try to change that so that we're working for them as opposed to them coming and having to do things that we think they should do.
Does that look like a community school, one of these efforts? And I say that using it as a very broad, generic term, but one of these schools that's open from 7 a.m. to 8 at night, where there's ESL, where there are computer classes. Is that what it ends up looking
As a
like?
community school coalition between Bernalillo County, the City of Albuquerque, and APS, we came up with the idea that every school could be and should be a community school. And that begins to place schools in a different context in a given community, where the doors are open, where perhaps there's a community school coordinator who acts similar to a principal, but not the same role as a principal. And that role is essentially to make sure that services are there. If they're services that are directed towards specific subpopulations, great, but let's get them there. Let's make the schools a place where it's an opportunity for people to move their lives forward, and not necessarily just a place where they come and drop their kids off.
Is there a way that we can do that without spending more money?
When family engagement takes on and at its core is about student learning, then that's when you will see the biggest gains in student achievement. In 2002, Henderson MAP really looked at 51 high-quality studies around family engagement, and what they showed is that there is absolutely a positive, convincing relationship between family involvement and the benefits for students, including improved academic achievement. And so it doesn't take, just take more money. Absolutely, resources are part of it. But when we get parents involved and engaged and just provide them that opportunity to focus on their child's learning, then we will see these improvements made over time.
The community school model is one that can provide families with more support and young people with more support. But if you don't change basically the relationship that Lorenzo's talking about in terms of how schools and educators see families and students, then we'll just be having the same conversation again 40 years from today.
Right.
It's got to change. It's the idea of engaging families in their child's education and using their ideas and their recommendations is different. And it creates a different kind of relationship for everybody, which impacts student success. So all these things that we're doing will help. And they're important and we need them, but you've got to change the basic relationship, in my opinion.
Do you see parents at times coming into a school and just getting turned off? And we talk about this idea, and this is the fourth pillar, cultivating equitable and effective systems. Coming in and just running up against what they think is a system that they just can't deal with. I have to go repair the car, cook dinner, and make a living.
Yes.
I'm not going to deal with this right now, and just turn around and walk out.
Yes, we see that very often. And part of that, stems from just walking in the door and having someone that can really listen to you and understand what the issues are. Many times our schools don't recognize that. And I think that is the beauty of this work and the work of community schools, because it is a collaborative. It's all of us working towards that same goal. And no, it doesn't have to cost more, but it does mean that we have to realign our resources.
What's a program that we can look at and say, okay, there's something that we can start with?
In New Mexico, it seems to me to be a no-brainer that every school should be dual language school. And we should move a lot of this upstream, and the APS and hiring policy should be that people should speak both, teachers should speak both Spanish and English, and we should teach all of the children Spanish and English from wee lads. And we will eventually overcome this language barrier. I mean, my son said, he goes, they got a different word for every word. But it's not that difficult, especially if you start young. I think it would transform our communities. I think that people would start this, if you learn a second language, I think it's important in developing the whole student. And I think it would dissolve a lot of barriers that we have going on right now.
For me, it's not as systematic as it is relational. It's relational. It's taking the time and building those relationships. I know without a fact that my non-Spanish speaking self can go in any community and be able to engage with parents in that community simply because I will take the time, as Lorenzo was saying, is to build a relationship with that person. We're able to break down communication barriers. And I think one thing we forget is when we get out there and getting caught up in all the busyness is the 3 R's, relationships, relevance, and repetition. The relationships we build, how relevant are they to helping our young people and what we're doing, and how often should we get together and communicate with one another to solve any issue?
Let's get some final thoughts here. As we said, we're taking just about a half hour to encompass something that's been years in the making, decades, as Diego pointed out. Let's get final thoughts as we move forward here. And I'm just going to read off the 4 pillars again. The first is fostering safe and welcoming environments. The second is strengthening relationships and capacity with families, teachers, school and district administrators, and community partners, and expanding communication between families, community partners, and schools, and then cultivating equitable and effective systems. as we move forward into this next school year, what's your one hope for getting this rolled out and finally getting the rubber to meet the road?
As a policy, maybe?
Sure, as a policy, as a program, you can get as specific as you want.
I really want to look at the policies that are in place. And are we actually making those policies friendly enough, equitable enough to really implement this policy? Because I believe that some of the policies that we have are actually barriers to getting this work done. And so I would really like to see that our school board really take a close look at that.
Lorenzo, how about you?
Well, I think that's really good. My hope is a little more basic. I mean, I want to keep having these conversations. I didn't think about it till just a second ago, but I have a file that's filled with hate mail that I get on a regular basis. And the hate mail essentially says things like, go back to Mexico. Why are you allowing kids to speak the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish, and those kinds of things? And so it's difficult because the racism that exists is still out there in different forms, but it's out there. And I'm hoping that we can, at least among ourselves as leaders, policymakers, as staff, that we can begin to have some of these harder conversations where people maybe don't have the same opinion, but we can at least get to common ground. And so I do want to look at policies, as Annalise suggested, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to build those relationships that Jose has talked about.
Delma, what about you? Do you just want help? Do you want another person in the school with you?
That would be great. However, I was thinking, I have a daughter who is a teacher. She's a 5th grade teacher. And previous to Rio Grande, I used to work Parents Reaching Out. And so I used to travel the state working with administrators in school to form action teams. And what I always came across was the practical stuff. How do I do this? Because you find the teachers, my daughter's one of those teachers, Mom, how do I do this to have more parent engagement? She knows the work that I do and that I was at her school for many years. And it is one of those things about just having some simple ideas of how to do this. And it is going to look different in the South Valley as opposed to the Heights. I mean, looking at safe and welcoming environments. I mean, we need a basic, just bilingual person in the front who can smile. That makes a huge difference. Whereas in the Heights, when I was PTA over there, it was having someone friendlier at the front. The needs were going to always be different, but we took that into account when we were doing this, and I think that's important to mention that this is specific but yet broad enough that applies throughout the entire district.
Yeah, and I would say that we hope that this creates a culture shift within all schools that make schools more accessible to parents. And when you do that, parents will take the lead. They will take ownership of education. And we've seen it over and over. We've seen it with this policy. We believe it starts at early childhood and that we shouldn't wait till it starts school. And we believe that it's beyond the school walls, that it's as much about what happens at home and how schools communicate with how parents can support learning at home in order for their kids to have higher academic achievement. So we believe that we all have a similar interest, a shared interest, just like we have for our own kids or our own grandchildren, that we share that interest and providing the opportunity, we'll all act accordingly.
I want to congratulate you all. You've done some pretty incredible work to get us to this point, and we wish you the best of luck as you kind of try to push on, and we hope that you'll come back too and talk to us more about what's working to keep kids in school and to keep parents engaged. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Much.
Governor Susana Martinez has until April 5th to sign bills into law. And as the clock ticks down, our next program features a panel with the Roundhouse Press Corps as they deliver their takeaways from the legislative session. I'm Gene Grant. We'll see you next week in Focus.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.